Greetings, YouTube. Today we're going to be continuing the story of my interpretation of the DC trio in the 19th century. Now, the last video ended in 1942, and 1842, and as I said, I'm going to jump forward to a couple of years to 1844. That gives you a 2-year gap where you could have adventures of Diana and Clark roaming around the world trying to find someone to help decipher the crystal, and working on Diana's agenda, which is the liberation of slaves and women. Also adventures for Dr. Bruce Banner as Bruce Wayne. My apologies, I saw Thor Ragnarok recently. Dr. Bruce Wayne, as he is fighting the unholy abominations of the world and trying to do everything in his power to prevent them from entering our realm any longer. And he definitely has that feeling that he is often working alone in this. Even though there are other people working on it, there are teams, he doesn't feel that they're always working it together. They're sometimes working at cross purposes. There's a lot of mistrust amongst these groups. Some even out now feel that some of their compatriots in this field are in fact have been tainted by the mythos itself. So, in 1844, the three of them finally meet. Now, one of the things that Clark and Diana have been doing prior to this meeting is they have been confronting slavery in America head on. Now, they're working in America because that's where Clark lives, and he was raised to think slavery is wrong. And America is the first culture that Diana has been really introduced to in a major way, in a full immersion, because Clark can immerse her in it in a manner that he can't in other places. They've been all over the place, all over the world, and they have been fighting for gender equality and anti-slavery efforts at other parts of the world. But they're really focusing here because Clark really believes that the American ideals are inherently opposed to slavery. He really believes in the phrase, we the people, that the people must be treated better than they are now. He wants to move people past poverty, past slavery, past gender inequality, past racism. And he is a pragmatic person and willing to use almost any means necessary to get to those ends. This is not the Clark Kent of the traditional comics. He is not the Blue Boy Scout. He is a different man. And because of this, he and Diana confront slavery in America head on. They will flat out move into an area, find someone that owns slaves, and simply liberate them. And if anyone takes up arms against them, they die. It's that simple. Their hit and run tactics are ones that cannot be fought against. They move too quickly, literally too quickly for the eye to see. Clark can fly, has a massively powerful ranged weapon. Diana is fast and probably the best combatant on the planet and almost as strong as Clark, and knows more about weapons. She's forgotten more about weapons than most humans will ever know. She has been fighting for hundreds of years. And this has caused a major panic among slave-owning groups in the South. Their legend is growing. There's unrest amongst slaves. There have been uprisings. They are becoming essentially deified by slaves. Their story has been moving through the grapevine. They are far more dangerous than the Freedom Railroad ever was. So Clark and Diana are something that the southern states are very worried about. Eventually, they make their way to New York, which is where Bruce is. They meet him finally because they've learned that he is a major expert on the occult. And they figure, well, a major expert on the occult may well have the ability to figure out what's in this crystal, or at least have the connections to figure out what's in this crystal. They meet. Introductions are swapped. Sorry, I have a cat that wants attention. And Clark asks Bruce, "Can you help me?" Bruce says, "I'll give it my best shot. Come back in X time. Let me look at this item." And he looks at it, realizes that it is actually beyond his scope. Puts some feelers out and finds someone that he thinks can crack it. One Edward Nygma. Let's throw some DC people in here. So Enigma begins to work on figuring out what's in this crystal. He knows it contains data. He has to decipher it. Now, even though Diana has a language, sorry, cat's trying to climb on top of my computer, has knowledge of almost all the languages of Earth, it doesn't mean that she's a cryptologist. It doesn't mean that she can decipher something that she has never been exposed to. And the Kryptonian language bears no relationship at all to anything from Earth. So even though she is well versed in language, kind of knows the tongue that all humans' languages theoretically sprung from, at least in the DC universe it is. There is no tongue. She can't help decipher this crystal. So Enigma begins to work on that. And Bruce starts to get to know these two people, realizes how they could help him and he could help them, both in their efforts to fight the mythos, because they've been doing that as well, and he has inroads into politics and such, which may help them move forward in the idea of gender equality and breaking the grip of slavery in America. The three begin to work together. And for a solid 3 years, they are a functioning, adventuring group, all the while getting little tidbits from Enigma that he has begun working and getting an inkling of what he's looking at it, but he has not cracked the code yet. And even in real life, cracking codes can be a laborious task, and there are languages that we have discovered from the past which have never been broken and may take lifetimes to finally break. We may need to find the Rosetta Stone, so to speak, to break that code. And when it comes to Kryptonian technology, there is no Rosetta Stone. So for 3 years, so we're jumping forward to 1847, the three of them work together as a team, fight the mythos, the two super beings occasionally making forays into the South to break free more slaves. The South is getting more and more panicked about this situation. The slaves that they are being freed are moving to the west. They're moving past the slave-owning territories, past the American border, and in further into the west, into areas that are just barely territories now. So there's a exodus. There's a black dysphoria into the plains and the middles of the American continent that we didn't see in our world. So history is being changed in a big way from ours, besides the fact that there are magical beings in it. To the best of my knowledge, Superman and Wonder Woman don't actually exist here. Enigma finally breaks the code. And what he discovers is the crystal contains in a location coordinates and plans for converting the escape pod that Clark landed here into a functioning vessel. Clark gets the vehicle, brings it to New York, so he can have access to Enigma's expertise, Bruce's expertise, and whoever else Bruce can make, say Copperpot gets involved, or whoever the toy maker is. Again, we can pull people in that are involved in this, and they don't necessarily have to be immediately be a danger. they could later at some other point become a difficulty for the group to deal with. Because while Clark and Diana are both very capable, they are not nearly as intelligent as Bruce. So there is possibly they could be tricked by supervillains of some variety. Heck, in the comics and the television shows, Clark has been tricked by supervillains on a regular basis. He is not a genius. Um, and the Clark I have created here is not as bright as the reporter Clark is in most of the comics and the movies, the TV shows. He is a relatively bright person, but he's not a well-educated one. He has no college education of any kind. He's simply a relatively well-read layperson. So they go about making the modifications to this escape pod, and that takes a while in it itself. We'll say it takes a year, 18 months. So you're moving now into 1848. Finally, they finish it. The problem is, well, not a problem, but the reality is the vessel can only hold one person. And they make sense that Clark is that person. And over time, Clark has realized he can fly up into space, but he can't breathe up there. So he has a limited range before he needs to come back to Earth. Inside this pod, he'll be able to go further, and the coordinates that he's going for are the dark side of the moon. So he hops into his pod, fires it up, and he zooms off. And it just GPS system, the vessel takes him there. He does not have to file it. And what he finds on the other side of the moon, the side that humans can't see, is a vessel. A much, much larger vessel. The Kryptonian ship that brought him to our system. Because the vessel that brought him to the planet was literally an escape pod. Not much bigger than the one that R2-D2 and C-3PO used in Star Wars. Maybe smaller than that. Because it was designed for one person, and that was it. So he docks with this. The ship comes alive, which is when he discovers that on board are two personalities waiting for him. His mother and his father. And for the first time, he is face to face with other Kryptonians who don't speak English. So, fortunately for Clark, the computer on board this vessel is very complex and is able to decipher what he says relatively quickly. And within about a month on board this vessel, all the time, Diana and Bruce are back on Earth wondering what the heck's going on. We don't know what's going on. We can't follow. We can't communicate with them anyway. And eventually, Clark is able to take command of the vessel, lift it off the moon, and place it in orbit on Earth, around Earth. And while he's been doing this, the vessel, through the lens of his parents, the personalities of the AIs on the ship, he has learned that the ship itself is a crystal star. It is an actual symbol of the Elder Gods. It is a barrier to the Cthulhu mythos. None of them can touch this vessel. It is protection in a way that no one has ever seen on Earth. And he also learns that this vessel is designed to become something more complex and larger. That given resources, materials, it could become a fully functional space habitat. So the ship begins to gather them, sending out probes, gathering materials from the asteroid belt, from comets, what it has, pulling them all together. Not taking anything from the planet, but just taking them from the system itself, moving them together, and creating an orbiting space station, which they place in a geosynchronistic lock over New York, because that is currently their headquarters. The thing could obviously move anywhere you want it to move if you don't want to center this in New York. Could be in Moscow. Could be anywhere. My apologies, my screen just went dead on me. And again, it's a giant elder symbol, protection from the mythos. So Bruce is thrilled by this. There are shuttles on board which are much larger, so now Diana and Bruce can come and go from their base on Earth to the ship itself. They're marveling at what this thing is. They've never seen anything like this. This is far more advanced. Bruce really begins to pick apart what's on board and realizes that there is a treasure trove of information here available to them. So they begin to work. And Bruce realizes that on board this ship are all the tools that Clark will need to achieve his goals, to raise humanity beyond slavery and poverty and gender inequality. That this ship has the data that they need, which is something I always thought that Superman should have been doing in other stories. Why wasn't he using Kryptonian technology? They know the faults that Kryptonian technology had. Now they don't have to repeat them. The AIs on board, along with the genius that is Bruce Wayne, can prevent that. I'm sorry, I get itchy when I'm tired. Can prevent those accidents, those mishaps, and can do better than the Kryptonians did. Not to mention the Kryptonians had been invaded and overwhelmed by the mythos in a way that Earth has not yet. And with this ship, with this habitat, as a place where the mythos cannot get to them, they can use it as the perfect base of operations to begin to wipe out the mythos on a vast scale. So Bruce goes to work. All the while, Diana and Clark are fighting the mythos, are taking on slavery, and the South in America is getting more and more paranoid. Bruce uses the information centered in New York, because that's where he is most comfortable with, and begins to do the things that will change the world. He introduces electricity. In 1850, Bruce is electrifying New York City. He introduces functioning public transportation in a way you've never seen anything like this. He doesn't introduce flying vehicles yet because he thinks that it would overwhelm people too much. But he begins to do trains and subways in a scale that nothing would have seen in the 19th century of our world. He begins to move humanity from the 19th century into like the 22nd, but slowly in increments. With Kryptonian science, he begins to alleviate disease. He offers perfect forms of birth control. Of course, the churches are all upset, chaos and everywhere, but they work and he makes them available free. This radically changes the dynamic. And as he begins to do this, he realizes that we can have automated farming that will free up humans from having to do this labor. Yes, it will put farmers as we know it out of work, but no one will go hungry. So we're moving forward in time now. 1852, the electricity and road systems and public transportation system is growing outward from New York. The northeastern of the United States, the area that is traditionally known as Yankee territory, is gradually becoming one interconnected, functioning metropolis in a way that never was. Because even though he's making sure that the rural areas stay rural, they are connected to the cities in a way that we don't even have. Because the power they're using isn't even using wires, it's broadcast. So you're not having to build that kind of an infrastructure in place. You're just giving people technology to alleviate misery and labor that just works. All running off fusion generators, or maybe something even more advanced, something that generates electricity from quantum fluctuations of the the superstring foam. You figure it out. It's gobbledygook anyway. It's handwavium. They're powered by handwavium. the South begins to panic. These pieces of technology are completely undermining their entire political and socio-economic structure. It gets worse and worse as far as they are concerned. By 1855, the South realizes they're at a tipping point. If we don't do something, the Yankees are going to overwhelm us simply for their superior technology, and we will become powerless. So the South rebels. And in 1855, they secede. And if they just had seceded, maybe the United States would have done nothing. Maybe there would have been a treaty or a compromise or something. But that stubborn Southern pride makes them attack the United States forces. And so what started as a secession, just as in our world, turns into a war. And that's where we're going to end this particular video because it's 21 minutes. And I actually may have to break this down into 3 videos because I needed to go from 1855 to the end of the 19th century. Then I'm going to take it from the 19th century, turn of the century to 1938. Kind of wrap it up. We'll end the video when traditional Superman story begins in the comics. I just thought of that when I was watching my Bruce Wayne video to try to get myself remind myself where I was in the story, because this is all out of my head. That there are no notes for this. I'm just kind of throwing at you from what I've thought of. So here we go. We're going to end it here. Tell me what you think so far. Do you think I've created a kind of a plausible storyline? At least is superhero, story arc plausible? Frankly, it doesn't seem any worse than the ones we already have. There have been so many story arcs for comics that make far less sense than all I'm presenting. But let's look at it. Tell me what you want to know about it. In fact, I am recording this the day before the first episode of this series started. So I'm hoping to have episodes 2 and 3 completed before I need them. Because I've got 3 weeks now to go after today before I need another video. So hopefully I'll have time to film the next 2 sections. So again, let's talk about this. Throw me your ideas at me. Tell me how you would make a slightly different alternative history. Do you think that pushing the Civil War up, almost a decade, or early almost a decade, is going to have a major difference as far as how the South functions? Because I don't know, actually, I'll be honest, I don't know how much difference there was between 1855 and when in real life, and what the technological or geopolitical structure was of the South when they actually seceded. Don't think there's going to be a big difference. Things changed a little slower in the past than it is now. So let's talk about alternative DC trios.